Welcome to this special episode of the Student Life Advisors podcast. My name is Tré.
I'm Elaine.
And we are going to be bringing you a conversation on what's top of mind in the world of the Biden administration student loan forgiveness and repayment relief. So we've got a lot to talk about.
It's quite the topic. The news was announced, August 24th. This is something that I've been asked, I've been doing this for 15 years now. I've been asked, I've had people assume their student loans are going to be forgiven for years.
Right.
And to be honest with you, I didn't think it was going to happen until the last few weeks that something was going to come. There was a few hints out there when we were getting ready, to start giving information to, people come to us for help about getting ready to restart repayment. It was pretty quiet. A lot of people weren't getting information from the servicers. We were seeing some media where borrowers got information to restart repayment soon, and then they were told it was a mistake that they received it. And they were getting closer to the end of the student loan repayment relief, which was going to end at the end of this month, this August 31st, 2022. So we knew something was coming. So the assumption is working out the details of some other things that came with this announcement. But student loan forgiveness is officially here.
Right.
It's hard for me to say that. I've always been speaking in broad terms.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, even when I was starting college about 9 years ago, I had heard about it, but like you, I didn't think that it would actually be here, where we'd be talking about it as an official thing that is about to impact some people.
Yeah, as a mass forgiveness. I mean, we've seen public service loan forgiveness, teacher loan forgiveness. Even back in the day, there was other types of forgiveness that were offered that have kind of faded out. But getting down to mass student loan forgiveness, where the qualifications are essentially going to be either $10,000 or $20,000, up to $20,000. It's going to be based on, $20,000 if you were a Pell Grant recipient.
Pell Grant. I received the Pell Grant. So
I received a Pell Grant as well. And if you didn't receive a Pell Grant, it's only going to be up to $10,000. And then there are some income thresholds thrown in there as well. So individuals making under $125,000, or family or married couples or head of household making under $250,000 per year in income. They're tying it to pandemic income. Got to wait for the details of what exactly that means. Like, what are the dates that they're really looking at to qualify for that? We've been in this pandemic type of status for several years now. So we're going to see what that looks like. Financial situations. I know from the people we speak to, I know from friends, family, personal experience, financial situations have kind of been all over the place in the last few years.
Pretty much.
So it's going to be interesting to get more of the details, but essentially, it's here.
Right. Yeah, and since it is here, and we understand so far that there are certain income levels that are going to allow someone to qualify for a certain amount and whatnot, I kind of want to touch on what we know so far, because we know that things can change. But so how is the process of someone applying for this program? I mean, what is someone going to have to do? Is it automatic? Are they going to have to fill out an additional application? What do we know so far about that?
So the announcement's the announcement. This is not uncommon for us to see, where we'll hear about something that's coming or something that's going to happen, but we have to wait for the details of how to actually get there. Yeah. So I know from the questions I've been getting, a lot of people are kind of assuming like maybe it's just going to be taken off my balance today or the next few days. That's not necessarily true. The announcement just happened. It's saying in there from the president, it's saying in there in the Biden press release, the U.S. Department of Education's press release, in there that they're going to create an application before the end of the student loan repayment extension, because with forgiveness, anybody had already been receiving student loan repayment relief who hasn't been made, you aren't required to make payments, 0% interest. That was set to expire, like we were saying, at the end of August.
Yeah, this month, right.
And now it's going to expire at the end of the year. So there's some time to kind of implement this, because they say they're going to need an application for some borrowers. And some borrowers may be able to qualify automatically, and that'll be handled automatically.
Oh, nice.
So we don't really know what that looks like yet, and who they're going to pick, I have some assumptions. Of course, I have some assumptions. Essentially, there are already borrowers who are repaying based on their income. And if you're repaying based on your income, you're probably already reporting your income. And the U.S. Department of Education also knows who received a Pell Grant and who did not receive a Pell Grant.
Right.
So there's some borrowers that they might have enough information to make that decision. And then other borrowers who are not repaying based on their income, they don't have to report their income. So they don't necessarily have that at the U.S. Department of Education. I'm not saying nobody in the government has it. Generally, the IRS will have it. So it's kind of working and ironing out those kinds of things. So we can make a few assumptions. Some people already share that information for their repayment plans. Others don't. So we'll kind of have to wait and see.
I think something that maybe our listeners have been running into is some different perspectives when it comes to this initiative. I know that, I was watching the news recently and I heard different perspectives, opinions on it. A lot of people having their opinions. So we just want to shed light on what's actually being said. So what have been some of the things that you've heard in response to this? And I've heard some too, and I'll throw in some of the things I've heard as well.
I mean, it's all different levels. It's coming from all different levels. We have congressional members who are making statements. We have influential people making statements. We have people from the public making statements. And then we even have people who are going through the college process now who are a little bit confused of, if this is going to apply to me or not. So we have statements, we have questions, we have comments, we have concerns. They're kind of everywhere. Some of the big stuff going on, especially with our own economy, is how is this going to affect inflation? Who's going to fund this? Who's paying for it? Those have all been, with everything I've heard, there's always every side.
Yeah.
There's two or more sides to every statement I feel like I've heard out there, and different perspectives that are out there. Essentially, when it kind of comes down to it, the biggest question people had is, who is going to pay for this? Is it going to be the taxpayer? It's a federal relief. Federal relief comes from federal funds. Federal funds typically are taxpayer funds.
I mean, that's a great way, I think, to explain it. Yeah, it's federal tax funds. Yeah, maybe an oversimplification for some folks, but like you said, there's opinions on both sides, and you can get into the arguments and this perspective is this side has this and this other side saying that, but what we do know is it's happening.
It's happening. It's going to be one time. So there are people who will be benefiting who already have student loan debt, and then there are people who are confused if this will apply to them later.
Right.
Which, in all honesty, we can't predict the future of future legislation or how well this works to see if this is something Congress or future presidents want to look into.
Yes.
Right now, it's one time. And because it's so tied to the pandemic, it's tied to the HEROES Act, it's tied to a few other things in the background, it's going to be a one time for people who currently have debt.
Right.
So if you don't have debt yet, unfortunately, I do not think you should be really expecting another $10,000 forgiveness just because it happened this time. But I can't tell you that it will never happen again.
Right. It's one of those things that's in the air. We'll have to see what happens, and only time will really tell if something like this does happen again or if this was just a one-off.
And the interesting thing is it seems like there's been a deeper look into student debt and how it's being managed. Things like income-driven repayment plan, they've introduced the fact that they're coming up with a new plan.
Right.
They didn't actually introduce the plan. We've got some high-level overview and details, but the details that we do have look like it's going to help resolve some of the previous issues people have had with income-driven repayment plans. And,
Negative amortization.
Oh,
we can get into that one. Oh,
yeah.
My goodness, yeah.
I think we're going to have an episode on that one because that's how it kind of works today.
Right.
So just for our listeners out there, if you don't know what that is, negative amortization is, you're making your monthly payments on your student loan.
Yes, you are.
And in most types of debt, you would be covering your accrued interest for that period of time, plus maybe paying down a bit of what you originally borrowed or their debt you have. And that keeps you, so that over time you start paying not only the interest, but what you owe, and that helps bring down your balance.
Exactly. So that one day when it's over, it's at zero.
It's at zero. And most creditors don't like to charge borrowers any less than accruing interest, because it starts ballooning, it starts increasing how much you owe. So negative amortization is essentially when your monthly payment does not cover your monthly accruing interest and your balance starts increasing over time. And income-driven repayment plans offered on some federal student loans, unfortunately, can put a borrower in this situation. And we've seen it happen. We've seen, I'm sure everyone's kind of heard of this happening. People have been making payments for years and their loan balance hasn't moved.
Right. It hasn't moved, or even it's gone in the opposite direction that they wanted to go.
Yes. So, and the way student loans work, simple interest. So it's a little different because they don't capitalize or they don't add on any of that interest technically every single time, every single month to what you originally borrowed or your outstanding principal balance. So it doesn't always capitalize, but sometimes you'll see on there on your statement like a box with your outstanding principal balance, which isn't moving, but your outstanding interest that you haven't covered yet, that's still accruing. People will start to see that increasing. And just because they have them separate, it doesn't mean that you don't owe that.
Right.
You owe it eventually. They're just being housed in two different buckets.
Interesting.
So it makes it tough for borrowers, but this new IDR plan, they're claiming could help with that and reduce that.
Yeah, I think that the new plan there is interesting, and we'll see what it does. I do think that they're making some adjustments there to kind of mitigate some of the things that we've talked about with like negative amortization, which is a big thing that they want to address. So, we'll see what happens there. And I know we talked a little bit about the payment relief extension. So what should folks be doing maybe now in preparation for this pause that won't last beyond, so far what we know?
They should be doing what Trey Norman would be doing.
Oh, okay. What's that? Getting a budget, huh?
Getting your budget together, understanding where your money's going, and understanding how you're going to incorporate a monthly payment back into your budget. So maybe you haven't been making payments since March of 2020.
That's a long time.
It's a long time, but there could have been some strategy a lot of these borrowers have been taking on, because just because you're not necessarily paying your student loans doesn't mean you're not helping yourself in other ways.
It's true.
It doesn't mean that maybe you kind of ignored it all and or maybe hurt yourself in some other ways. But I'm sure I've talked to a lot of families, I've talked to a lot of students who've asked, what should I be doing? When something's not getting more expensive because interest isn't accruing, maybe you want to look at some other debts you might have. Maybe you have credit card debt. Maybe you did some of those buy now, pay later type of things.
Yeah.
Maybe that got a little out of hand. Maybe you have a car payment.
Yep.
With a pretty high interest rate. If there are other things that have higher interest rates, sometimes it's worth it to tackle those. And you had 2.5 years to kind of take a look at that and pay that down.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you think about what these monthly payments may have been for individuals, and I think you're absolutely on to something. If maybe you were paying $500 a month for your student loan, and you haven't had to pay that for 2.5 years, that $500 could go a long way on lots of other debt that you could possibly have.
Other debts, if you had a change in your financial situation, that could have helped. They say it's the final time. I'm going to put it in quotes. There's been a whole bunch of memes of like, are we just putting this in quotes now? They've said final, I think, 3 times now. It probably is final. I don't know. It could change next week, but
yeah, we'll see.
As of right now, they're saying this is the final extension of this repayment relief. We know that from some studies that have come out that 2% or so of people have been making payments as normal.
Yeah.
But the rest of the individuals have not really been doing that. So it's kind of just an interesting thing to keep in mind that, we're going to have to start making these payments again, and they're going to have to be aimed at your student loans when you enter repayment. Now, you could have forgiveness by that time. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
But even with the maximum amount of forgiveness of $20,000, we do know the average student loan balance for borrowers out there is over $30,000.
Right.
So there are going to be many borrowers who either don't qualify or still have a leftover balance.
True.
So you have to get ready for repayment in the new year if you fall into that category. And I have a pro tip.
Oh, pro tip. We love pro tips. So let's bring it to the people.
So if you believe you will be qualifying for student loan forgiveness, and you have been making payments, but you believe the amount you'll be qualifying for will take care of your entire loan balance.
Okay.
Did you know that you can actually request, especially for those federally held loans? We have a great blog that we will definitely be providing in the comments.
Absolutely.
That'll go through this of what a federally held loan is.
Read up.
And, if you've been on the student loan repayment relief, essentially you have a federally held loan, and others could get there. But if you've been making payments, you can actually request a refund. Going back to March of 2020.
Whoa.
So that's a pro tip. So if you've been making payments and say you have a balance of $8,000 that you've been paying, as long as the loan isn't gone, you can actually request from the U.S. Department of Education to have your payment refunded to you. And then you can wait to qualify for this forgiveness.
You said that's a pro tip. That's like a championship tip. That's veteran level, not a pro. That's vet level tip. Oh my goodness.
All that came from COVID-19 relief, the ability to ask for a refund for payments made during this student loan repayment relief. So it's all tied to that. So it's not all the payments you've ever made. It's all the ones that fall into this time frame.
Right.
All tied to pandemic relief. It's just kind of combining two different rules together or two different announcements together and applying them at the same time.
Interesting. All right, so there's two more things I think we want to hit on. The one I think that we definitely want to mention is the public service loan forgiveness. So PSLF, we know that has been something that individuals have utilized for forgiveness before. Any updates to that with this particular announcement?
So with this announcement, they actually did something they didn't do something we were hoping they would do. And by we, as I work with a lot of people in the industry, and we've had a lot of discussions about this. Public service loan forgiveness since last October 2021, there's been some waivers to the eligibility requirements.
Interesting.
And that makes it a lot easier for people's past time in a repayment status to count towards the 120 payments. Public service loan forgiveness, quick overview. Without the waivers, you need to make 120 qualifying payments on a direct loan while working full-time for an eligible employer, which is generally 501c3 or any level of government and tribal government. So we got 120 payments, full-time employment with an eligible employer under an eligible repayment plan. Yeah. That sounds like it's just a few easy check boxes on there, but it was really confusing in application. So they actually got rid of most of the waivers.
Interesting.
Eligibility requirements through waivers, where essentially your loan had to be in a repayment status. And you had to be working full-time for an eligible employer, and the months in repayment could have counted towards your 120 qualifying payments.
Thank you for getting to this point in the podcast. As you know, we give you a bonus code with every episode. Use the bonus code RELIEF for 100 points that you can get on scholarshippoints.com. Remember that you can use your points to enter into exclusive scholarships available only on the website. And we give out scholarships every single month, so you never know, you could be the one to win. So use the bonus code RELIEF, that's RELIEF. Now let's get back to the podcast.
From before, when I said eligible repayment plan, it either had to be a standard 10-year or an income-driven repayment plan. People got a little confused with that, and because you don't even technically apply until you're done with the 120 payments.
Yeah.
They submit their application, they're told.
No.
Yes. Or you missed something, or you didn't do this quite right, or There's issues with the type of loan they had. They thought it was all federal student loans. It's really only direct loans. It's not FFEL loans unless you consolidate into the direct loan program. And consolidation was restarting the clock for the payment counter.
Right. So
now,
if you had 5 years of payments, but you didn't consolidate in some cases, hey.
You start back at zero, but the waivers got rid of that. So now if you consolidate, your time and repayment total will count.
Oh, that's going to be beneficial for a lot of borrowers.
And that's been out since October of 2021. Those waivers are set to expire October 31st, 2022. We thought that was going to be extended. It was not extended. So if you've been told no before, if you've gotten a no before, but you still worked for that eligible employer, you had federal student loans, look into it again. See what you need to do to qualify. See what you need to do to get employment certifications over, at least to lock them in. Because even if you don't have the full 120 by this October 31st, 2022, you can lock in those payments. That's a pro tip as well. You can lock them in, get that counter closer to 120, and then keep doing what you're doing to get to 120. But what they did announce in this was not the extension, but they are saying in the future, they're going to make it easier for borrowers to qualify for public service loan forgiveness and make some significant changes. All the changes we're not sure about yet, once again, but they're just going to make it a little bit easier going forward to have borrowers qualify. Just because I don't think they're seeing what they want with that.
Interesting.
I mean, when you're targeting public service, we're targeting nonprofit, 501c3. And then even think about it, like what falls under government, like your state, your cities. So school teachers, people who work at hospitals, a lot of hospitals are nonprofit 501c3. Colleges sometimes are private, nonprofit 501c3. So you've got teachers, it's anybody who works there. So you don't have to be a specific profession there. If your employers qualifies, you qualify.
Yeah.
So everybody employed by that organization would qualify. So.
Right. Yeah, I think sometimes people may be focused on the specific occupation, but like you said, no, it's the employer.
It's the employer.
The employer. You can be doing a job that maybe isn't directly connected to what the employer is known for, but because you're with that employer, like you're in there.
Administrative staff, janitorial staff, anybody who works there qualifies. Because I get that question a lot. Well, I'm not an actual teacher.
Right. It's like
but
but
you're employed by the state and you work at a school.
There you go.
You qualify.
Exactly.
Like, well, I'm just, in the front office. I'm like, okay.
Who's paying?
Who's on your W-2? Who's paying you?
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good distinction, I think, and way of breaking that down for folks. So another thing I want to touch on, we've been talking about some of the changes that are coming along with this announcement, but something that's pretty interesting that I think could be pertinent to students is these transparency lists. You showed me some of these and I was kind of blown away by the data that was there and how you had the ability to look at a particular school and see how much their tuition costs have increased over the past few years. I thought that was interesting, and I believe that they're adding something else to that list.
Yeah, so transparency lists, they're always available on collegecosts.ed.gov. It's a government resource, so we know it's trusted. But essentially, transparency lists have been a way the government has try to demonstrate to families what they can kind of expect, especially when it comes to things like college affordability.
Right.
So they kind of put them on the list. Right now, what we can see on these lists are some of the schools with the highest cost of attendance or the highest increase over time, like percentage change over a few years. One thing they've announced in this is adding a little bit more transparency, which is tracking programs that have the worst debt level outcomes.
Wow.
So we're going to have to hear of more of what they're tracking. What does that mean? School-based. They did say the word program, but then they start referencing the college. So maybe it's going to be a college type of list, but we're going to have to see what that means. And if any school does cross, it seems like if they're ranked up there, it seems like they might even have to submit plans to get that under control.
Wow.
In the future.
Talk about accountability.
Yes.
Oh.
So it's going to be out there. I don't know where they're going to be publishing this or when they expect to get this information or how, but they're announcing that they want to start looking into debt level outcomes, which, we're kind of in a student loan debt crisis is what I guess the term we've been hearing in the media and such. So having a student loan debt level crisis, this is a way for the government to try to add some more transparency of which schools are not requiring, but students need to borrow more to attend them and graduate.
Yeah, exactly. Just letting those students know, hey, this is how much this school costs now. This is what it cost a few years ago. Who knows, maybe even it'll cost more. So what can your borrowing expectations be going into that? And then here's the debt levels for individuals who graduate from this institution. So keep that in mind too.
Keep that in mind that this is what they're borrowing. This is the type of debt they're seeing. And you just want to keep that, you just want to understand that, especially if you're a student going into this where you're relying a lot on your financial aid and maybe you do have to rely on those student loans. We know sometimes they are necessary. You have to sometimes invest a little bit in yourself.
Yeah.
Always keep it reasonable is the advice we give, but that's advice. Real life situations, being 2 or 3 years into a program, then running into a crisis, people will typically solve any way they can.
Yeah.
And kind of do things out of feeling like it's a necessity or a need. And sometimes the decision making is a little bit more reactive.
Yeah.
And you just kind of try to get through it. So
absolutely.
It'll be interesting to see what happens if this information is being made more public. I mean, there's a lot of resources out there. So I got to hand it to families. We work with them every day. We try to give them the best information every day of starting the college journey. Like everything you have to factor. Like, I don't know about you.
It's a lot.
But like you can create the spreadsheets, you can create the different things you want to track. You can track almost anything.
Yeah.
At this point. But if you are borrowing, you do, like I said, like we say, like you do, create that budget.
Yeah.
Be realistic. Set numbers before you even start setting schools.
Ooh, I love that tip. Set numbers before you start setting schools.
Because at least you have like some sort of guideline. So then you can focus more on the financials of it all. Especially if you're a student in that situation where you are concerned about money and finances. And I was one of those students and I got really anxious because I didn't really understand. Honestly, I would say I didn't understand how money worked.
Yeah.
Until I really got thrown into it. But if you just take the time to go through it, because sometimes then it's easier, even if there's a school brand name that you got into and be proud that you've gotten into these schools. But also understand, there is a life after college and you don't want to spend that life just paying student loan debt back. So if you're focused on a max number of how much you can pay and a max number you're willing to borrow each year to total a max total indebtedness when you graduate, that might be easier to make the decision versus I want to go to this school no matter what. Because you can get really tied to the school, but if you can shift your focus just a little bit to those finances, it might make it a little easier.
That's some good stuff right there, Elaine. I appreciate your expertise on this. Like you said, you've been in this space for, is it over 15 years? I know
No, not over. I think we're like right at 15.
Right at 15? Okay, cool.
At least we'll go with that.
Yeah. Let's say 15. You've been in this space for around 15 years and it shows. So I think that our listeners will definitely appreciate that. And we'll keep them posted as we get more information as it becomes available. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Student Life Advisors podcast. We were glad that you were able to join us for this special episode with some interesting, relevant news that we hope was relevant to you. Until next time, we'll see you.